Hello and welcome into a new episode of the Glue Guys. I'm Landon Lucas and that's Richard Lucas, and we got a good episode for you. We're going to go over the Big 12 tournament, preview it a little bit, give our picks for it, go into a little bit at the end about Kansas's struggle the last few games and how they can turn it around. And postseason's finally here. How you feeling, March? It's here.
I'm telling you, there are very few things in life that are as exciting as March Madness. Now,
Mhm.
come on now. I mean, birth of your children, marriage, all that stuff, that's not fun at all. But come on, when it turns the corner into March and you start hearing about buzzer beaters, Houston at the last minute getting it, their shot and all this stuff, and these Cinderellas that are going to start happening out here pretty soon. It's the best time of the year. I feel like Dickie V right now, but I'm telling you, it feels awesome. So I'm pretty pumped about it.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. And you can already, it's like you feel the energy in these games around college basketball. All of a sudden, buzzer beaters are starting to happen. There's crazy
Right.
comebacks, and it's like, okay, we're getting ready for the madness that's about to come here in March. But I want to get started with the Big 12 tournament. We'll kind of work in reverse order. Start with that, and then we'll go back and look at the last few Kansas games. But what are your thoughts heading into this Big 12 tournament? Let's go ahead and pull up our brackets and we'll just go ahead and walk through it. But first, I want to hear
Right.
your bracket and then, kind of briefly run us through it. And then I'll go ahead and go over mine. Actually, let's start with the first playing games and give me,
Okay.
your first few games. You got West Virginia, Texas Tech, and then Oklahoma State, Oklahoma.
Right. So with those two, to me, the scariest one of those four, even though they're not ranked of those four, they're not ranked the highest, is West Virginia, and I kind of wish West Virginia was on the other side and not playing Kansas. So I think that of those four, I think West Virginia beats Texas Tech, and I think it's pretty handily. And then I do think that Oklahoma State takes care of Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the worst team easily in the conference. And so when you start talking about those games, I feel like Huggins just seems to know what buttons to press at the right time. The guy's been doing this a really, really long time. And they just it's something about that team, right? I mean, like
Yeah, yeah,
when you were at Kansas, like it just kind of they were usually pretty good during
yeah.
those years that you were there. So they had the talent. They don't quite have the talent this year, but it always feels like there's like you know what I mean. Like you just have to sweat it to try and get past that game. Does that seem the same? Do you feel the same?
I agree. I agree. And I think it's a lot of credit to Bob Huggins. Obviously,
Right.
I was through the years of press Virginia. I don't, you remember the press they used
Right.
where we were practicing, against eight, or more people in practice to just try to simulate the press that
Right.
they would throw into you. They've gotten away from that. But, Huggins, he still knows what to do. So I'm assuming you have them winning that. And then in the Oklahoma State, Oklahoma game, who's your pick there?
Oklahoma State.
Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna go exact same too. I got on mine. I have West Virginia handling business. I know there's a lot of going on with the coach at Texas Tech and stuff right now. So I'm just gonna go ahead and
Right.
give Huggins that win. And then Oklahoma State. I think Oklahoma State has a lot of talent. They're good defensively. They got those bigs inside, those athletic guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and give them the win as well. Now we're getting into the fun stuff. This is when, I mean, this tournament, it's one of the best conference tournaments in the country, and having
Right.
the power and light district and stuff. When you get to this next round where you got these matchups, this is when it really
Right.
starts to get interesting. So
Right.
let's start, at the top. We got Baylor, Iowa State, and then Kansas, West Virginia. So
Right.
who do you see advancing through those four?
So when you start thinking about on paper, you start
Mhm.
going Baylor based on guard play. And there's a lot of great guard play in the Big 12 this year. I mean, unbelievable. But you start talking about guard play, you start talking about coaching, and Scott Drew's pretty good at this as well. He's been doing this for a while, and national champion. You start thinking that Baylor should win this
Mhm.
originally, on paper, I should say. But Power Light District is about Kansas, but it's also about Iowa State. I've
Yeah,
been
yeah.
there during the Big 12, And I'm telling you, them Cyclone fans do not play. I mean,
Yeah.
they are out there in force, and I feel like it's going to be essentially a pseudo home game
Hmm.
for Iowa State, and
Yeah.
so that's why I do think that Iowa State takes the victory against Baylor.
I gotta stop letting you go first because you're taking my stuff. That's exactly what I was gonna say. I have the exact same pick. I got the upset in a way, Iowa State over Baylor. I think that you add in the factor that they call it a Hilton South or something. That is
Right.
the they pack that place. And I also think there was a little bit of controversy or adversity that they were going through with the release of Caleb Grill, but they're the type of team that team chemistry matters more than anything. When you have a team that there's not really superstars, they just want to play together as a team, go out there, fight together as a team. Having
Right.
good team chemistry and getting rid of anything that may be outside distractions or pulling away from that, I think can
Right.
really affect this team in a positive way. And you saw that with how they just beat Baylor on Baylor senior night pretty handily. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Iowa State as well there. And then Kansas, West Virginia. What do you have for that one?
So I think I'm obviously saying Kansas, and I feel like everybody would say Kansas other than West Virginia fans. But I will say this is going to be Kansas's first game
Mm-hmm.
since the Texas loss, and we're going to get a real chance to see how that loss impacted them. Do
Mm-hmm.
they come back ready to roll? Coaches got them focused, rejuvenated, or whatever you want to call it, and they come out there and handle business, or are they going to come out and it's going to be sluggish and it's going to be just kind of one of those, like, not dirty in a bad way, just those kind of games that's in the trenches, and next thing you know, it's still a KU victory, but it's by 3. you
Mm-hmm.
know so my pick is going to be Kansas, but I kind of feel like it's going to be close. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be way closer than anybody anticipates, and a low scoring game.
Yeah. Again, we got the same pick there. I got Kansas going through. I do agree that it's going to be a tough one for Kansas. I think you look at this Big 12 tournament, and Coach Self really, I know during my time there, he puts a lot of emphasis on the regular season Big 12 winning that.
Right.
And then it turns all the way to NCAA tournament. I mean, like, that is main, like, that's top of mind as soon as you get that, clinch the Big 12 and whatnot. Obviously, it's nice to go out there and get some momentum put on for the fans in Kansas City. I have won it a couple times. I've also been out early a couple times.
Right.
Either way, you go into you either look at it like, great, we have some momentum. We won the tournament, or oh well, we get some rest. And so obviously we'll talk about that more as this conversation goes along, but I do think that this could be a close game. It's going to be an important one for the fact that, like you said, coming off the last few games, this is going to be one that I think you need to at least notch one win in this. And so I have them moving forward. Let's move to the bottom half. There's Texas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, TCU. I'm going to go first now.
What?
With a couple,
All right.
just so it doesn't seem like I'm just taking all your picks here.
Right.
But
You're like ditto.
I'm like, yeah, everything you said, I agree 100%. But I have Texas advancing against Oklahoma State. I think Texas is a great team. I believe that they're just more talented. They're going to be able to get this done. Get this first win. And then TCU against Kansas State is going to be an extremely fun game. I have TCU moving forward. I think TCU is going to be one of the underrated teams in this tournament. I have them moving forward to face Texas in the next round. All right, go ahead.
I swear to God, I should have gone first because I was so ready to have the first upset of this whole tournament.
Okay.
And okay, well, it's not the Texas one. That's not the upset I'm talking about. So don't get that twisted. Texas for sure. They're just like you said, just way too talented. I think they're going to lock in defensively, and Oklahoma State's going to struggle. I think it's an easy win for Texas. But then
hold on. Are you about to call Texas TCU beating Kansas State?
Yes, Yes, that's what I have. That's what I have.
Well, hey,
It's-
Iowa State against Baylor was more of an upset than TCU's a damn good
yeah,
team.
that's true.
But okay, so
But
I'm assuming you're going with me yet again here.
I'm going with TCU over Kansas State. I do think that it's going to be a fun game. I just don't know if Kansas State is ready for prime time quite yet.
Yeah.
And I think that when you start talking about TCU, and remember, this is the same TCU that went into Allen Fieldhouse and beat the crap out of Kansas. This
Yeah.
team is good.
They're
Their
good.
guard, that transition's amazing. Um, I feel like TCU takes it over.
All right. So just
Come
for
on.
for
Maybe
the
we should have put
listeners,
those
hey, for the listeners and people watching this, we have not gone over this with each other yet. So
I
if
know.
somehow we have the exact same bracket all the way through,
All
I
right,
mean,
well,
that's just a coincidence. I doubt it because I'm going to go to my next pick right now. We're going to move
okay.
on. So here's the final four we got set. We have Iowa State versus Kansas and Texas
Yes.
versus TCU. We're going to
Yes.
start up top with Iowa State, Kansas. And here's where I think we're going to go different because I am going to go with Iowa State here. I'm going to go with the upset. I just feel for the reasons we had talked about before. You add in the Iowa State fans. Now I remember my buddy Naz Long, who we went to high school together. He went to Iowa State. And they were always in the tournament at the same time. I would see him around the hotel, around the gym, talk with him. This is their biggest thing of the whole. This is what they focus on. Winning the Big 12 tournament is the biggest thing for Iowa State. That's what it's relayed down from the fans. You feel it. That's all he was focused on against a Kansas team that I just told you that wasn't our focus. We would love to win it. But more than anything, we want national champ. We already clinched and won the Big 12 in our eyes, which I think the regular season is more of a crowning of who's the best team than this, short
100%.
tournament. So I'm going to go into this. I think Kansas struggles against West Virginia, comes out with the win, and then goes into a game against Iowa State where I think they struggle again. Iowa State comes out. That crowd gets crazy behind them. Iowa State could mess around and prove me wrong and lose in the first round and get blown out by Baylor. But I have them winning against Kansas, going to the championship. And I think Kansas, go ahead. You have that talk with Coach Self afterwards. All right, we use this time. We rest. We get ready for the most important time, which is the NCAA tournament, which I still think they would get the number one overall. I think they deserve it at this point in time. So I don't think it really matters that much, but I'm going to have Iowa State advancing. So are we different on this? Did we finally have different brackets?
Do you want to do that, or do you want to wait to do the other half? Or
all right, I'll do the other half first. So,
then I'll fill you in after that.
So then we have Texas, TCU on the other side. And this is going to be a good one. Obviously, Texas just went into TCU in a massive game for them to hopefully give themselves. They would have shared the Big 12 title if they won this. And they go out there and they take the L in a game where the star player at TCU didn't even play very well. So I think TCU continues that. TCU's got a good team. I think they're just going to play well this tournament. And I think they also have a coaching advantage, which is going to be important in this. So I'm going to go with TCU versus Iowa State in the championship game. So go ahead and give me your final four.
So we really differ on this one.
There we go. Finally, there we go.
Exactly. So, all right. So let's talk about Kansas, Iowa State. So again, I was the one who originally was talking about how those Iowa State fans come out. They don't play Hilton South or whatever they call it. Power Light District's going to be hopping. But here's the one thing, and the reason why I think Kansas comes out on top is because they've got a Hall of Famer as a coach. Yeah. And I just have to feel that even though they may struggle against West Virginia, when it means something, which now you start getting into the semis, it means something. We're going to talk a little bit about the Texas game a little bit, but you have to believe that when I say the Texas game, the Texas KU game at the end of the regular season, you have to believe that they already wrapped it up and they were kind of okay. And if they take the L, they take the L. I don't think that's going to be the situation here. I think
Mhm.
that Iowa State's going to bring it. They're going to be pumped, and then they're going to get frustrated because Gradey comes to town and starts hitting some threes, and Jalen's being Jalen, and all of a sudden they're dunking. And remember, it's still KU's home
Mhm.
essentially. And so I just feel that in the end, it's going to be a KU victory. I don't think it's going to be a struggle and be really close or anything like that. And I also don't think it's going to be a blowout. I just think that Kansas at the end of the day is just too talented, and they have, you talk about coaching advantage. They have the ultimate coaching advantage with Coach Self.
Yeah.
So I think they advance to the finals, and then on the
You
other
got
side,
Texas.
I'm going chalk with this. I mean, it's just there's a reason why they are the number 2 ranked team in the most difficult conference
Yeah.
in the country in basketball. It's because of the consistency that they've shown throughout the year. Yes, I would say Jamie Dixon at TCU is a better coach, but I don't think that there's enough going there for them to beat Texas twice within a short period of time. So
Mhm.
I think that Texas handles business, and then you've got the number 1 ranked Kansas Jayhawks versus the number 2 Texas Longhorns
Which I
in
think
the
is going to
final.
be, the prediction for a lot of people. I just want to be a little different on mine. But so tell me,
Hey,
so you got Texas versus Kansas. We just saw this other night in the
right.
championship game. Who wins that this time around?
I say Texas Longhorns win.
Oh wow! So you
Yeah.
just talked about
So
how Kansas
I
has
I
this
know.
massive coaching advantage, and Kansas they step up and rise to the occasion and all this
Right.
stuff, and now they have that same situation, just even more so in the finals,
Right.
and then they just lay an egg and
Not
and
that they
don't.
just lay an egg. I just think that all the things that you talked about, where coach says, "Hey, we're going to get after it. We're going to try and win this thing."
Yeah, but once you get to the
So,
championship, that's the thing that I'll tell you one thing. I've lost in the first round. I think we even lost it in the second round my senior year against TCU, I believe. And we've also won it. But it's rare that you make it to the finals and you lose. Once you get to the finals, it's like, okay, we're already playing the max amount of minutes in games here. We might as well win it and play balls
yeah.
out and take this thing home. So that's where I think if Kansas is going to make it there, they're winning the Big 12 tournament. But
We'll
I
see.
mean, all right,
We'll see. They just got beat pretty handily,
yeah, no, very,
and
and we'll get
it
into that in a
wasn't
little
that
bit.
long ago.
Yeah,
It wasn't like it was in January or something like that. So we'll see the
okay,
adjustments and all of that.
yeah,
But that's the only spot where I'm gonna really go off is that I think that Texas handles
Texas
business.
wins. Okay.
Uh,
Well, I have Iowa State versus TCU in my final. It's probably not one that many have, but I just see I think the madness gets started early, especially in a tournament where I think in the NCAA, my favorite 3 teams are Kansas, Texas, and Baylor, and I have none of them in the championship game. I think they're all going to be focused on NCAA and moving on to that. Baylor, I don't think has ever Scott Drew. I don't think he's ever even won the tournament, but they went on. I think they lost in the first round the year that they won the national
that's the one, the
championship.
whole thing.
So I
Yeah,
could
I
see
mean,
that being another case. But here we have Iowa State, TCU, and just real quickly, I'm gonna go with TCU here. I think the Matt Hilton magic
wow,
runs out, and TCU just goes out
wow.
there, and TCU we goes ahead and cuts down the nets in Kansas City.
So I mean, I could throw this right back at you because you talk
Yeah,
about Hilton South and how
yeah,
those
yeah.
TCU fans are all that, and then you're trying to tell me that the
They
little
can only
TCU.
carry them so far. It can only take you so far. And you get there, they're gonna be hyped up, but I think they're gonna have, some you gotta go through Baylor, Kansas to get. I think, in these back to back on the third day of that, after those 2 grinded out games, emotional wins that they're gonna be excited about. I think they
Right.
come into it, and I honestly think TCU probably I don't even think it's close. I think TCU kind of runs away with it, and they look like kind of the Iowa State that maybe, we may see earlier in the tournament if they do show up, don't show up and they lose. So I'm gonna go with TCU, Iowa State, man.
And so you still think that KU gets a number one seed, even though they will have lost 2 of 4?
I don't even think I think they'll get the number one overall seed. I think if you look across the other number one teams and the struggles that Alabama's having and the struggles that some of those other teams are having, and then you really are competing against a team like Houston, I don't care how you finish the season, and especially in games that
right
really
up there as well now.
Who?
UCLA.
Yeah, not for a number one overall, not in the Pac-12. And I mean, they come on, who's in the Pac? You should know the Pac-12. That's a couple good teams and a bunch of teams that wouldn't even get a win in the Big 12. I mean, so yeah, I would go with, if you're really comparing number one overall and it's going to be them or Houston, you just have to give it to the team that's really shown throughout the year that they can beat some high quality teams, and they've gotten enough wins. I think the resume has spoke for itself, and it goes back to, I believe it was, I think we got number one overall junior and senior, but one of the years I think we lost in the Big 12 tournament and we still got it. I don't think that it's going to affect much. They should look at the whole season and see that if you won the hardest league, I mean, pretty handily, they dropped that last game and still won it outright. I think that's enough. They'll come in, win their game. If they lose against West Virginia, now it's like, okay, that's tough. But if they beat West Virginia and then lose against like a Baylor or Iowa State in that second round, I think they still deserve it. But that is our brackets, and it brings us into our sub and sub out, because we're talking about, what matters, what doesn't matter.
Right.
I have a sub and sub out for you today, and that is, are you subbing in or subbing out on this? That the loss to Texas didn't matter. And so I want you to sub in that it didn't matter, or sub out that it did matter. So does that loss even matter?
So I'm subbing in that it did not matter.
Mm-hmm.
And my thinking is this, is that, you take there's something about momentum. So I do understand that. I just don't think that loss really was that big of a deal. And the reason being is that, again, they'd already taken care of outright of winning the Big 12, which is very important to coach. Doesn't have quite the level of that importance as during your time there to keep the streak going, but still, for winning it is still very high on the list. And then the next thing is you start thinking about, let's look at that regular season as a totality, and the fact that they played some really great teams and they took care of business when they needed to win this league. And so that loss, in some books, and some people may think, actually might have helped them a little bit. Because sometimes taking that L allows your players, to realize that they're not invincible. And that they can lose and they can be beaten pretty handily, like they were, if they don't come ready to play. So I'm not worried about the Texas game, even though we just talked about them potentially struggling against West Virginia, potentially, and you saying struggle and then lose. But still, in the grand scheme of things, that loss at Texas was a very good team. It's not like they lost to some crappy team at home, on the road against Texas. I still think that for me was not that big of a deal, and they're going to be just fine.
Okay. I'll go the opposite, and I'll sub out and say that it did matter. I think that obviously this could all be proven wrong, and like all they have to do is just show up and get back on track, and then it means nothing. However, I think right now I would say it didn't mean something. You look at the way that they played against Texas Tech, which was not a good game for them at all. Texas Tech looked terrible in that game, especially in the first half. It was one of the I haven't seen a Big 12 team look that bad all year, and yet Kansas was still keeping them in the game at home on senior night. And obviously it was a close game towards the end. you may be able to give a little bit towards like the emotions of senior night or these guys' last game. I know I was a part of some where we just didn't show up as well. We still got the win. But what you're hoping to do is right that wrong in that next game. And a game that I go back to where I look at a team that I was on and how we responded in a similar way was we had already clinched the league at home, senior night, close game. I think it was against Texas Tech. Our very next game was at Texas, meant 0. Texas was top 20, I think, and it was their senior night. We didn't need the win for anything, but we wanted to make a statement. We were the number 1 overall team. We wanted to go in there and we wanted to, let them know that we are. There was no, okay, hey, let's take this one off, anything like that. And we went out there and it immediately, I think, was like 16-0 or something. They had that standing thing where they stand until the first bucket, and they were standing through like the first 2 TV timeouts. I mean, we jumped on them. It wasn't even close. And that was something where it was a little bit of, hey, this is our league. We won this. We're putting the finishing stamp on it and getting some momentum for the postseason, which I think that last game of momentum, that was my junior year. That propelled us to then winning the Big 12 championship right afterwards, and then making an Elite 8 run where we fell to Villanova. But we just rode that momentum going into the postseason. And I think that when you're looking at just the way this team, is heading into this postseason, it's kind of on a little bit of a uncertainty down part of the, you look at, there was that, obviously that losing streak, but then they come back, they look great again. It's like, okay, Kansas is back, they're a national title contender, all this stuff. And then the last few games, it kind of feels like, okay, Gradey's not playing great, which we'll get into a little bit. And as a team, they just aren't looking like the dominant number 1 overall seed that you would expect them to look like right now. That's a game where I would want to go in there and make a statement, turn things around heading into the postseason. They didn't do that. In fact, they didn't look good at all. Texas had way more energy. They just played well and dominated the game from start to finish. That's not what I'm liking going into the postseason. So obviously, like I said, that can all go out the door. This could mean nothing if they come out and they smack West Virginia or get some momentum heading into the postseason. It could be all for nothing. But as of right now, I'm going to say that at least mattered a little bit. So that's my side of it.
Yeah, I mean, and I do. I get what you're talking about. One thing that you kind of mentioned the difference in how that junior year team handled it versus this year's team. There's a big difference between those 2 teams in terms of talent as well, in my opinion. I mean, that junior team was probably, and I've seen lists of the greatest teams to not win a national championship, and that team was actually on that list because of how talented you guys were. And so I think that there's I think it's that's putting a lot of not so much pressure or weight, but to say that team should have come out and just dominated that last game. I'd be happy for them.
It's a better Texas team too. I mean, the Texas team we played was the 20th or something, and this is a top 10, Texas team. But yeah, it makes sense. But I still feel, I mean, especially going into a Big 12 tournament where you honestly don't mind an early exit and some rest. That's where you want to put a stamp on the end of the season. Now you go into this, you're kind of free rolling it. If you lose, you focus on the NCAA tournament. But yeah, I mean,
we'll find out, right? I mean,
we'll find out
in just a couple days or whatever it is. We'll see them against. We're assuming West Virginia. Who knows?
Okay.
Who knows? But yeah, I mean, how they play and how they look in that really that early on, because that was the thing too, that they went through that stretch where they would be down early. Mm-hmm. And that was they were always having to try and dig themselves out of a 16-7 hole that they were in. And for a few stretches there, they were, especially at home, they were able to kind of figure that out. But man, it's just like the hope is against West Virginia that they just don't allow that, or any of these teams, because I just don't know how many times they can go to that well and get themselves out of trouble.
Yeah. All right. We got 10 minutes left in this short little preview episode, but I want to get to one last thing, because something that you had brought it up last episode, and I, was like, no chance. Gradey's playing so good, this and that. You brought up his shooting struggles. You said, he's not shooting quite as well as you would like from him. Right. And then all of a sudden we get off the show, and then the last two games he goes 0 for 7, 4 points against Texas Tech, and then 2 for 5, 6 points against Texas. That's not the Gradey that we had gotten used to. Obviously, This is the worst time for him to be in kind of a slump. He needs to turn it around. As a coach, what are you doing with him? What are you telling him? What is your message to try to get him to turn this around for the most important time? Because in March, you have to make shots, as you and I both know. And he's probably your best shot maker. What are you doing with him? How are you treating this heading into the postseason?
So the thing is that I personally have never been a shooter myself. so this is from as a coach, one of the things that we would always look to do is shooters want to see the ball go through the rim. So we've heard that before, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it's, let's get him going downhill. Let's get him going to the hoop to where he's either getting layups or he's getting fouled and he's going to the free throw line and he's able to see his shot go through the rim. The thing that I feel is happening is that, there's a lot of pressure on him to make shots. And if you are the 3-point shooter, and I've heard Jay Billis, I've heard some of them talk about how he's the greatest shooter because of his release and how great he is and mechanically. And yes, he's great at all of that stuff. But the one thing is right here. He physically can make those shots. And we know that. I mean, we've seen him do it. The problem is that I think he starts to get into his own head a little bit too much. And if he misses one or two or whatever, he's not able to dig himself out of that. It seems to spiral a little bit. So you've just got to get him in rhythm and tell him and give him that green light to just keep shooting the ball. Because we do know that once that does start to click, he becomes unstoppable at that point in time. Yeah. So we want to get him easy shots. I like it when he either trails or he picks and pops and gets to the corner and is able to get a corner jumper. But if I'm coach, I'm saying, this is it. This is the time, and just go for it. Just shoot. And if you miss 5 in a row, I want you to shoot a 6 and just keep at it. So that's kind of how I would handle it. And let's just hope that he doesn't go 0 for 7. Yeah. That would be bad. and that this thing is turning on. But the reason why I brought it up real quick the last time, I know we got to finish up, is the fact that I just felt that from that position is that I would want that position to be hitting shots in the 40s. And the thing is that yes, as a team, if we are 34% or 30%, then that's great. But when I have that position, I would like for that person to be hitting more shots and better shots. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I agree. And what I would do is, you have a guy like Gradey. He's not a pure it's not like he only shoots 3-pointers. It's not like we're talking about Brendan Green here. So what I would do is get him other looks, other shots early on in the game. What I saw against Texas, especially, and against Texas Tech, is one, he wasn't taking a ton of shots. He wasn't getting a ton of opportunities, especially early in the game. It was almost a while until you saw his first shot. And his first shot would come, 10 minutes into the game or 15 minutes, and it's a 3-pointer as his first shot after taking all that time without taking one. So what I would do is, in one of the first few scripted plays of the game, get him the ball doing something that's it doesn't even have to be a 3. Get him driving, look for him on a backdoor cut, look for him to come off a screen and, get him the ability to get a shot up in a different way and get into the game shooting the ball in a different way, and maybe even get to the foul line if he gets fouled. That's the way I would try to get him incorporated, because you don't want your best shooter to be taking his first shot 10 minutes into the game and have it be some 3 that's probably a contested 3 at that. So I say, get him some confidence early on. And there's a lot of ways you can work with a guy like this because he is a scorer. It's not like he's just a 3-point shooter only. We've seen him get that nice little, off the drive, a little pull up, a little pump fake pull up. We've seen him be able to turn that into a dunk at the rim or a tough finish at the rim. I mean, there's a lot of ways he can score. So I think that Coach Self is aware of this. He's aware of the slump that he's in. And I could see early on against, the West Virginia or Texas Tech in that first round matchup, trying to get him involved early because Coach Self knows that more than winning that game or anything, it's important to have Gradey feeling confident going into the NCAA tournament. And this is the time to get it going. This is the time to get some shots up, some reps, and then hopefully get back on track so you aren't getting these games come tournament time, because that's going to be hard for Kansas to deal with and still win those tough games if he's not making a shot. So, okay, well, this is probably going to be our shortest episode.
I know, right?
But just a quick, little bracket run through and then a little bit about Kansas in the last few games. And now we go into the most fun time of the year and one of the best tournaments, which is the Big 12 tournament. Just as a fan, it's fun to watch. And I predicted some craziness happening. I know you kind of did until you went chalk towards the end, but we'll see how it goes. I think for Kansas, as a Kansas fan, what you're hoping for more than anything is just injury-free. Step one, you don't want any injuries. And then just not an embarrassment that really kills your confidence. That's if you can avoid those two things as a player and as a coach. I've been on, both sides as a player, as far as an early exit or winning the whole thing. And really, I've made it just as far for, after both results. And I think there's benefits to both of them, and there's also negatives to both of them. And so I think if you're Kansas, avoid injuries, avoid an embarrassment, and then go into this postseason confident. So it was a good, fun, quick episode. As I said, we'll be back recapping the Big 12. We may even have to split up into two because we got to recap what happens, and then we got to really deep dive into we won't cut it short for the NCAA tournament. That's when we lock in and focus. And
I already got a winner for you. Loyola Marymount is going to win the whole thing.
Oh my gosh! All right, well, maybe we shouldn't have you on. I need to find a different co-host if that's the route you're going for that.
Loyola Marymount.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. As always, leave a comment, like, subscribe, do all that stuff, and we will be back here again next week. See you guys.